If you asked his neighbors to describe him in one word, they'd all say the same thing: normal. He was the guy who shoveled the sidewalk before anybody asked. The one who waved at the Amazon drivers, who remembered to bring the trash cans in on time, who kept his lawn cut just a little better than everyone else's. He coached Little League. He grilled burgers on summer weekends. He wore polo shirts and scuffed sneakers and had exactly one beer at block parties before switching to water. Because someone's got to drive the kids home. His name was Daniel Cole, 41 years old, married, 2 kids, minivan in the driveway, mortgage on a 3-bedroom colonial in Maple Ridge, Ohio, the kind of suburb that prides itself on being close enough to the city, but far enough from the noise. If you scrolled his social media, you'd find photos of his kids in Halloween costumes, a shot of him at a charity 5K, red-faced and smiling, a Thanksgiving table covered in food, tagged grateful. Nothing that would make you stop, nothing that would make you think, this man has a storage unit under a different name. This man has a second phone that his wife has never seen. This man knows exactly how long it takes for a body to stop bleeding. When detectives finally walked through Daniel's front door at 6:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, his daughter's backpack was still by the stairs. A cereal bowl sat in the sink. Kids' drawings covered the fridge. Behind the family photos in the hallway, hidden in the wall, they found categorized trophies from 8 women who never made it home. The worst part? They'd been looking for their killer for years. They just never thought to look over the fence at the dad in the cargo shorts flipping burgers. This is the story of the suburban dad living a double life as a killer. The case didn't start in Maple Ridge. It started 26 miles away, on the city's east side, where the suburbs give up and the streetlights get farther apart. On a rainy Thursday night, June 3rd, 2021, a 29-year-old woman named Jamie Ortiz clocked out of her second job at a strip mall bar. She was exhausted. She'd picked up an extra shift, stayed late to help the bartender count the drawer, and missed the last bus to her neighborhood. At 1:18 a.m., security cameras showed her standing under a flickering street lamp, put up, scrolling on her phone. A steady drizzle turned the parking lot into a mirror. She opened a rideshare app. No cars nearby. Surge pricing. Again, she cursed under her breath and backed out. At 1:23 a.m., another camera caught a gray minivan pulling into the far end of the lot. It idled for a few seconds, then slowly rolled toward her. Jamie hesitated. The van's passenger window slid down halfway. The driver's voice was polite, not pushy. "You stuck?" he called. "Buses are done this late." She stepped closer, staying just outside the window's reach. "Yeah," she said. "My ride bailed." "Hop in," he replied. "I'm heading toward the interstate. I can drop you near the main line, safer than standing out here." She shook her head. "I don't get in random cars." He nodded, an almost relieved smile on his face. "Good," he said. "You shouldn't. Too many weirdos out these days." He tapped the rideshare sticker on his windshield. "I'm not random. Daniel. Rideshare. You can sit in the back and keep the door cracked if that helps. Or I can just call you a car from my driver app. It'll come faster if I ping it." She studied him, middle-aged, glasses, clean t-shirt, no visible tattoos, no obvious red flags. His dashboard held a pack of gum, a phone mount, and a reusable coffee cup. It looked like every other commuter car in America. She checked his plate against the app. A car with that plate really was in driver mode nearby. Not his name, though. Different first name. She missed it. She was tired, wet, alone. At 1:25 a.m., Jamie opened the sliding door and climbed into the back seat. "Don't take me down any weird roads," she said lightly. "My cousin knows where I am." It was a lie. He chuckled. "Straightest way home," he promised. The van pulled out of the lot, turned right, and merged onto the state route that fed the interstate. Traffic cameras caught it 3 more times in the next 10 minutes. After that, Jamie Ortiz was never seen again. On Cedar Ridge Lane in Maple Ridge, June 4th started like any other Friday. Sprinklers ticked to life. Dogs barked at nothing. Parents in business casual hustled kids into SUVs. At 7:12 a.m., doorbell camera footage from across the street captured Daniel Cole stepping out of his gray minivan. He wore slacks and a white dress shirt, a tie draped around his neck. He looked like he'd just come back from a morning coffee run. He opened the back, pulled out a laptop bag and a reusable grocery tote, and walked up his driveway. He waved at his neighbor, Tom, who was wrestling a scooter into the trunk of his car. "Morning, man," Daniel called. "You guys ready for the big game tomorrow?" "Trying to be," Tom laughed. "You're still good to coach?" Daniel nodded. "Wouldn't miss it," he said. Inside, his wife, Megan, was packing lunches. She kissed him on the cheek as he walked into the kitchen. "You're early," she said. "Carpool ran smoothly?" "Yeah," he answered. "Light traffic." Their daughter, 8-year-old Lily, was coloring at the table. Their son, 6-year-old Owen, was watching cartoons. Daniel ruffled their hair, the picture of a hands-on dad. "Who wants pancakes tomorrow?" he asked. Both kids raised their hands. He chuckled, opened the fridge, and took out orange juice with the ease of a man completely at home. If you froze the frame right there, if you showed it to a focus group of strangers in another state, they would all say the same thing. This is what safe looks like. A dad, a kitchen, kids, backpacks, cereal boxes. They wouldn't see what the detectives would later see in that same footage. A faint streak on the cuff of Daniel's dress shirt. A smear he'd missed when he changed. Or the way he glanced just a little too long at the door leading down to the basement as he set his bag down. At 8:02 a.m., he backed the minivan out of the driveway again, kissed his family goodbye, and drove off to his job as a mid-level project manager at a logistics firm. In his trunk, beneath the removable floor panel, a single gold hoop earring slid side to side gently with each turn he made. It did not belong to his wife. In the city, Jamie's disappearance didn't make the news right away. She wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. She had no dramatic security footage of her being pulled into a van. She just didn't clock into her next shift. Her manager texted, called, shrugged. People miss shifts. By Monday, Jamie's sister Isabel had had enough. She filed a missing person report. The officer at the desk was polite, but distracted. "Adults can go off the grid if they want to," he said. "She got any history of..." "She shows up," Isabel snapped. "She pays rent. She takes care of my mom. She's not a flake. Something is wrong." He took the report, checked a box, entered data into a system that already had too many names and not enough answers. 3 weeks later, a crime analyst named Priya Desai noticed Jamie's file while updating a case summary for her unit. Priya wasn't a detective. She was a computer, or that's how some of the older guys in the squad talked about her. She saw data in patterns, not lists. On a quiet afternoon, she decided to refresh a side project she'd been tracking for months. A map of missing women taken from the city and surrounding counties since 2018. Most were runaways. Some were domestic violence cases. Some had been solved. 8 had not. She added Jamie's last known location point to the map. A red dot appeared on the east side. Then her stomach moved. She zoomed out. The unsolved cases weren't scattered, like she'd first thought. They weren't random. They formed a loose crescent around one specific corridor of the interstate. A woman was taken after her shift at a diner near exit 13. Another last seen leaving a motel by exit 19. A third whose car was found abandoned at a park and ride near exit 21. Jamie's last ping at the strip mall near exit 17. The average distance between their last known points and the nearest on-ramp? Less than 3 miles. Priya circled the cluster with her digital pen. "No way, this is nothing," she murmured. She pulled their files. Different ages, different races, different jobs. The only thing they shared was they were women alone at night, near entrances to the same interstate. Within a 3-year window, she wrote up a brief and brought it to her supervisor. He skimmed it. "Could be a coincidence," he said. "Different jurisdictions, different circumstances. Or," she countered, "it's someone who uses the interstate system to hunt, and we just haven't connected it yet." He sighed. "I'll float it at the next interagency meeting," he said. No promises. The file landed a month later in a larger joint task force review that had too many pins and not enough string. But out in Maple Ridge, Daniel Cole was doing what he always did, showing up, smiling for team photos, taking his kids to ice cream. No one knew that when he drove to run errands on certain nights, he always took the same on-ramp near exit 17, and always came back calm. Every crime story about a double life has the same moment. The door that shouldn't open. The door no one thinks about until it's too late. In the Cole household, that door led to the basement. It was never locked. There was no padlock, no heavy bolt. Just a plain white door with a child-proof knob cover that made it a little harder for small hands to twist. Megan hated the basement. It smelled like dust and concrete and old paint. The washer and dryer were down there, humming in a corner like two white sentries, and the exposed pipes overhead made her feel like the ceiling was sagging. She went down as rarely as possible. Daniel, on the other hand, practically lived down there on weekends. My workshop, he called it. He'd set up a folding table with neatly arranged tools, a pegboard with outlines for each wrench, each screwdriver, each pair of pliers. He'd installed extra shelving along the back wall for storage. Labeled bins, winter gear, kids' clothes, Christmas decor, old taxes, everything in its place. Megan never had a reason to open the bins. If she did, she'd have noticed that the top layer in each matched the label, and that everything below was sealed in vacuum bags that did not belong to them. One Saturday, late September, while Daniel took the kids to soccer practice, the washing machine overflowed. Megan cursed, grabbed towels, and opened the basement door. Water had crept across the concrete floor in a wide, shallow pool. The machine gurgled, trying and failing to drain. "Of course," she muttered. "Of course this happens today." She waded down barefoot, unplugged the washer, and turned off the water lines the way Daniel had shown her. As she straightened up, she noticed a cardboard box near the back wall had fallen over, its contents spilling into the water. She hurried over, annoyed at the extra work. Then she saw what was inside. Not Christmas ornaments, not kids' clothes, photos, hundreds of them, floating slowly in the shallow water like a deck of ruined cards. She picked one up, dripping. A young woman stared back at her, not smiling, not posing, just caught mid-movement, looking slightly surprised, like she hadn't realized someone was taking her picture. Megan frowned. She didn't recognize her. She didn't recognize the next woman either, or the next. Different faces, different hair colors, different ages, all shot in that same flat, direct way as if cataloged, not remembered. Her throat tightened. "What on earth?" she whispered. She stacked the wet photos on the nearest shelf, hands shaking now. At the bottom of the box, something glinted. Jewelry, rings, earrings, necklaces, all tangled together, none of them hers. None of them was tagged or labeled. Just a pile of metal and stone that did not fit with the family she thought she had. She heard the front door open upstairs. Children's voices. Daniel's laugh. She stared at the box, at the photos, at the scattered jewelry. Then she did something she would later replay in her head 1,000 times. She shoved everything back into the box, closed the flaps, pushed it behind a stack of holiday decor totes, ran upstairs to the sound of small shoes on hardwood. "Hey," Daniel said, stepping into the kitchen. "Washer give you trouble?" His eyes flicked, just once, toward the basement door. "It's fine," she said quickly. "I turned the water off. We'll deal with it later." He smiled. "We always do," he said. He kissed her cheek. His lips were warm. His hands were dry. In the trunk of his minivan, beneath the removable floor panel, a new bracelet with a broken clasp slid side to side with each movement. It did not belong to her. All right, let's keep building from where we left off. 2 months after Jamie vanished, her file landed back on Priya Desai's desk. A patrol officer, sorting body cam footage for another case, had flagged a detail from the night Jamie disappeared. A cruiser had driven through that strip mall lot at 1:30 a.m., just minutes after Jamie got into the gray van. The officer hadn't seen anything wrong. He'd rolled through, checked for open doors, and kept going. But his dashboard camera had caught a glimpse of a van pulling out of the lot. It was the same gray, same body style. The plate was muddy and partly blocked by glare. But Priya managed to freeze a frame where 3 characters were visible. 7G2. Not much, except for 3 other unsolved cases near that interstate had eyewitness references to a gray van or a gray SUV near the last known location. She ran the partial plate through DMV records. Dozens of hits. She narrowed them by vehicles registered within 30 miles of the clustered disappearances. Owner profiles matching male, 30 to 55. Frequent toll tag pings near the relevant exits at night. 3 plates remained. 1 belonged to a retired teacher who barely drove after dark. 1 belonged to a plumbing company with GPS logs that contradicted the late-night sightings. The last, registered to Daniel and Megan Cole of Maple Ridge, Ohio. Priya pulled his basic file. No criminal record. Married. 2 kids. Employed. Minivan insured, inspected, and dull. If she'd just seen his face, she would have closed the tab. Instead, something else snagged her attention. Daniel's plate showed an unusually high number of late-night toll crossings on weekends, often between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., on the same stretch of interstate where the missing women were last seen. He didn't work nights. He didn't have a second job. Officially, Priya dug into rideshare records. Most companies didn't hand over driver data without a warrant, but she cross-matched open-source information, old job listings, and a small batch of records obtained in another case. Daniel Cole's name didn't appear, but a driver with a similar vehicle and partially matching plate did, under a different first name and slightly altered last name. A driver who often went online near exit 17, then turned the app off before picking up any official rides. Who drives around signed in without taking fares? Priya muttered. Someone who's hunting off the grid, her brain supplied. She wrote a summary and sent it up. It landed on the desk of Detective Luis Herrera, City Homicide, who'd quietly suspected a pattern long before anyone else wanted to say serial. When he saw the minivan's registration address, Maple Ridge, the safe suburb, he felt the first real jolt of the case. Of course, he lives in a cul-de-sac. He said to no one. Megan tried to forget the box. She told herself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Daniel did photography once back in college. Maybe the jewelry was from estate sales. Maybe there was some benign, boring answer she just hadn't heard yet. For a week, she pushed the memory down. For a week, she couldn't look at her husband the same. Every time he stood at the grill flipping burgers, she saw the photos in the water. Every time he tucked Lily in, she remembered the strange women's faces. One night, after the kids went to bed, she caught herself staring at him too long. "What?" he said, smiling. His smile was easy, practiced. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just tired." "We both are," he replied and turned back to the game. She almost told herself she was being dramatic. Then the mail came. They weren't paperless on everything. Bills still showed up in the box. She sorted them at the counter while the kids argued about whose turn it was for the tablet. Debt, electric, credit card, a thick envelope she didn't recognize. Storage plus, statement enclosed. She frowned. They didn't have a storage unit. Not that she knew of. She opened it. Inside was a monthly invoice for a 10 by 15 climate-controlled unit on the industrial side of town. Rented 3 years earlier. Renter D. Cole. The contact phone number was not their home line, or Daniel's personal cell. A slow, cold rose in her chest. That night, she waited until Daniel fell asleep, his breathing soft and even. She slipped out of bed, padded to the kitchen, and went through the junk drawer where he kept cables, batteries, and old chargers. At the very back, beneath a tangle of cords, she found it. A second phone, older model, no case, no stickers, dead battery. The charger was right beside it. Her hands shook as she plugged it in. When the screen finally flickered to life, she saw a lock screen with a simple 4-digit code. Their anniversary, of course. She entered it. The phone opened without resistance. No family photos, no kids, no shared vacations, just a list of numbers with no names and a ride app driver profile under a different first name. Same last initial. Trip logs showed late-night routes across the city and back, many ending near on-ramps. Few had actual passengers. Her stomach turned. From the living room, she heard the murmur of a late-night news segment her husband had left on. Still no leads in the disappearance of 29-year-old Jamie Ortiz. Megan froze. On the TV, Jamie's photo appeared. Young, smiling at the camera in a way the women in the basement box had not. Megan felt the world tilt. She looked at the phone, at the storage unit bill, at the basement door. Something inside her finally snapped free of denial. She picked up her own phone and, for the first time in her marriage, tapped the numbers for a non-emergency police line. Her voice shook, but she got the words out. I don't know if this is anything, she said, but I think you need to look at my husband. Detective Herrera had been waiting for a break. He just hadn't expected it to come from the suspect's own wife. He listened carefully as Megan described the photos, the jewelry, the second phone, and the storage bill. He didn't accuse. He didn't comfort. He just asked precise questions. Did he ever mention the storage unit? Have you ever met any of the women in those photos? Has he ever hurt you or the kids? She answered as honestly as she could. No. I don't know who he is, she whispered at the end. Herrera took her statement, looped in Priya and the task force lead, and moved faster than anyone expected. Within 24 hours, they had a warrant for the storage unit, a warrant to clone both of Daniel's phones, a quiet surveillance team set up on Cedar Ridge Lane. They didn't want him to notice the net tightening. At 10:03 a.m. on a Wednesday, 2 unmarked cars rolled into the Storage Plus facility, scanned their paperwork with the manager, and walked down the long corridor of roll-up doors. Unit 314. The metal door rattled up. The smell hit them first. Not rot, not fresh death, just stale plastic, metal, and the faint tang of bleach. Rows of metal shelving lined the walls. Plastic bins, all labeled. Not winter gear, not kids' clothes. Victim initials and dates. Priya's stomach lurched. Herrera kept his face neutral, but the muscle in his jaw jumped. They didn't touch anything at first. They photographed. They filmed. They called in CSU. When they did start opening containers carefully, with gloves and masks and evidence markers, the pattern that had lived as dots on Priya's map became horrifyingly tangible. Wallets with expired IDs matched women on the unsolved list. Jewelry identical to pieces seen in old social media posts. Shoes, scarves, accessories no one had known were missing because no one knew where to look. And photos, hundreds of photos, printed, not just digital. Women in parking lots, at bus stops, and bar doorways, walking with heads down, unlocking cars, checking phones. None of the images was graphic. All were invasive. All were trophies. Herrera stared at a photo of Jamie outside her strip mall bar, shot from across the lot. He was watching her for weeks, he said quietly, waiting for the right night. One bin at the bottom of the shelf was different. No label. Inside, CSU found a bound notebook. Every page was filled with Daniel's neat, blocky handwriting. Dates, locations, weather conditions, short observations, bus stop, favors hoodies, always alone. Works double shifts Thursday/Friday. Walks through dark lot. Puts keys between fingers. Teeth clenched. Aware, but tired. It read like logistics planning, like route optimization, like someone using his professional skills on a different kind of cargo. On the last page, a line that made Herrera's skin crawl. They never looked twice at the guy with the car seat and the snack wrappers. They didn't storm the Cole house with sirens and flashbangs. They walked up the driveway just after dawn, when the kids would still be in pajamas and the neighbors were stirring coffee. Neighbors later said that was the scariest part. How normal it looked until it didn't. Doorbell cameras captured it from 3 angles. 2 plainclothes detectives and a uniform, standing on the porch, hands visible. Megan had taken the kids to her parents' house the night before for a visit, at Herrera's request. He didn't want them in the line of sight when their father's world collapsed. At 6:42 a.m., Daniel opened the door in a t-shirt and sweatpants, hair flattened on one side. He blinked at the badges. "Mr. Cole?" Herrera asked. "We'd like to talk to you." "Sure," Daniel said, voice calm. "What's this about?" "We have a warrant to search your property and your vehicle," Herrera said. "We also need you to come with us to answer some questions." For a split second, something flickered across Daniel's face. Annoyance? Surprise? Then it was gone. "Can I at least call my wife?" he asked. "She's safe," Herrera replied carefully. "You'll both have the chance to speak to counsel." They cuffed him on the porch. He didn't fight. He didn't raise his voice. Across the street, neighbor Tom stepped out in a robe, eyes wide. "What's going on?" he called. Daniel looked at him and did something no one could explain later. He smiled, a quick, polite, neighborly smile, as if he were lending a ladder instead of being led into a police car under suspicion of multiple homicides. Inside the house, CSU moved with quiet efficiency. They took electronics, hard drives, the second phone from the junk drawer that Megan had left in place at Herrera's request. In the basement, they found the box. The photos were dry now, warped from their soaking but still clear. The jewelry was cataloged and bagged. Behind the shelving, they found a shallow cut in the drywall. Inside, wrapped in plastic and taped with meticulous care, were more trophies. Herrera stood in the middle of the workshop and turned in a slow circle. Everything neat, everything labeled. Everything was ordinary until you knew what to look for. "You think there's bodies?" one junior officer asked quietly. "He's not stupid," Herrera said. "He moves. He uses the highway. He doesn't bury anything near home. He doesn't have to. But this," he gestured at the boxes, the notebook, the photos. "This is enough." In the windowless interview room, Daniel looked smaller without his suburban armor. No kids in the background. No lawn. No grill. Just a metal table, a styrofoam cup of water, and the steady red blink of a camera. He sat with his hands folded, as if at a PDA meeting. Herrera entered with a second detective and a thin stack of photos. "Morning, Daniel," he said. "You know why you're here? You've searched my house and my storage unit." Daniel replied, "So I'm guessing you have ideas." "We do," Herrera said. "We want to hear yours." He laid out photos. Jamie, 2 other missing women, some of the surveillance images from the storage unit. "Do you recognize any of these women?" Daniel studied them, expression neutral. "I've seen their faces on the news," he said, "like everyone else. Your storage unit has its IDs," Herrera said. "Their jewelry." Photos of them were taken from a distance, clearly without their knowledge. "Help me understand that." A tiny smile ghosted at the corner of Daniel's mouth. "You're the detective," he said. "You tell me." Herrera didn't rise to it. "We will," he said, "in court. But you know how this works. Juries like to hear from people in their own words, especially family men, suburban fathers, normal neighbors." Daniel's jaw tightened at that. "Do not talk about my family," he said softly. Something flared in his eyes then, something cold and proprietary. Herrera noted it. "Your family is why we're here," he replied. "Your wife is the reason we found the storage unit. She saw the photos. She saw the trophies. Do you know what the word she used was?" Daniel swallowed, said nothing. She said, "I don't know who he is." Herrera continued, "Help her out, Daniel. Who are you?" Silence stretched. The second detective slid another photo forward. "The gray van is in the strip mall lot. Plate partially visible. We can put your vehicle at more than one of these scenes." Herrera said, "We have toll records, app logs, cameras. You know how the system works. You're a logistics guy, right? You understand how routes tell stories." Daniel stared at the photo. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost conversational. "Do you know what it's like?" he said. "To be invisible?" Herrera waited. "You show up," Daniel continued. "You fix things. You coach. You stay late at work. You hold everything together. People don't see that. They see what they want. Oh, he's responsible. He's safe. He's good with kids." He looked up, and Herrera felt something shift behind his eyes. "It occurred to me one day," Daniel said, "if they don't really see you when you're good, they won't really see you when you're not. So you started hunting women who were alone," Herrera said, "because you knew no one would really see them either." Daniel smiled faintly. "You'll make your story," he said. "You'll paste your words onto my face. Killer, monster, predator. That's what makes it easier, right? To sleep at night. You took them," Herrera replied, voice steady. "Whatever you call yourself, that doesn't change." For the first time, anger cracked through Daniel's calm. "You left them there," he snapped. "Every one of those women told someone they felt unsafe. Told someone the lot was too dark, the bus stop too far, the guy at the bar too close. Do you know how many reports get filed and forgotten? How many patterns got ignored before I ever touched a steering wheel?" Herrera's jaw clenched. "You're not their avenger," he said quietly. "You're the one who made sure they never got home." The room went quiet. Daniel leaned back. The mask slid back into place. "Talk to my lawyer," he said. The rest of the interview was procedural, legally necessary, spiritually useless. The real answers were in the evidence, not the man. News breaks fast in a suburb. By midday, Cedar Ridge Lane was a minefield of reporters, live trucks, and neighbors in shock. Microphones appeared like weeds. "He was always so nice," one neighbor insisted. "He watched our kids once when we had a flat. He fixed my fence," another said. "Didn't even want gas money." Cameras panned over the front of the Cole house, zooming in on the swing set, the chalk drawings on the driveway, the neat flower beds. Every detail became evidence in the court of public opinion. How could a killer live here? How could a family not know? Megan refused interviews. She moved in with her parents, kept the kids off screens, and answered only what she had to for investigators and attorneys. At night, when the house finally got quiet, guilt gnawed at her. She replayed 1,000 small moments. The nights he'd run out for milk and come back hours later. The way he only volunteered to drive certain routes for carpool. The faint metallic smell on his clothes that he'd always blamed on a weird day at the office. "I should have seen it," she whispered to her sister. "You saw enough to stop it," her sister replied. "That's what matters now." For the families of the missing women, grief took on a new shape. It had a face, a house, a minivan. Some felt relief. Some felt fresh rage. He got to tuck his kids in. Jamie's sister Isabel said, while we were putting up flyers with her picture. In the squad room, Priya stood before a board covered in photos and lines. 8 women, dates beneath each, last known locations. She drew a 9th circle, smaller, with a question mark. "We may never know the full count," she told Herrera. But the interstate overlay alone suggests he used the same pattern more than 8 times. He had a system. Herrera nodded grimly. "He thought like freight," he said. He saw people as routes and windows, thin places where they were isolated just long enough. The phrase stuck with him, thin places. The trial turned into a spectacle. The media ate it up. Suburban Dad serial killer? Little league coach accused in string of murders. Monster in the minivan. Prosecutors moved carefully. They didn't throw every unsolved disappearance at the jury. They chose the strongest. Jamie, whose last known footage and toll records tied Daniel's van to her route. 2 other women whose IDs, personal belongings, and DNA traces were found in his storage unit and basement. They called expert witnesses, forensic specialists who walked the jury through matching hair fibers and trace evidence. Digital analysts explained how Daniel's second phone and app patterns conflicted with his alibi. Priya testified about the map. The defense tried to paint it as circumstantial. Mr. Cole lives near an interstate, his attorney argued. He drives, so do thousands of others. Having personal items in a storage unit is not a crime. There is no direct physical evidence of these women being harmed by him. Our system requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Not fear, not pattern recognition, not a story. Then Megan took the stand. Her voice was raw but steady. She talked about the storage unit bill, the second phone, and the basement box. Did you ever suspect your husband was harming people? The prosecutor asked. She stared at her hands. I suspected something was wrong, she said. I just didn't want it to be this. Do you believe he did these things? The prosecutor pressed gently. Tears stung her eyes. I believe he hid who he was from me, she said. I believe those women didn't just disappear on their own. Across the courtroom, Daniel watched her without flinching. No outburst, no plea, just that same calm mask. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They convicted him on 3 counts: kidnapping and murder with special circumstances. He received life without parole. The other 5 women on the board were listed in court documents as probable associated victims, but never formally charged. There were whispers of more in other counties. No one had the resources or the stomach to chase every mile he'd ever driven. After the verdict, reporters moved on. Other crimes, other trials, other faces. The Cole house went up for sale, then sat empty, then eventually sold to a young couple from out of town who wanted a safe neighborhood for kids. The swing set came down. The chalk washed away. On the internet, true crime communities dissected the case for months. Some focused on the logistics, his route choices, his use of a second identity on rideshares apps, his meticulous storage system. Others fixated on the psychology. How could a man be 2 things at once? Devoted father and methodical killer? Helpful neighbor and predator? Priya kept the original map in her office. Herrera kept a copy of the notebook page with the line about the guy with the car seat. They both understood something most people didn't want to. Daniel Cole wasn't a monster hiding in the woods. He was a man who understood exactly how invisible normal can be. He weaponized it. He turned PDA meetings and block parties into camouflage. He knew that if you play the part well enough, if you smile, show up, and mow your lawn, people will write a story about you in their heads, and they will cling to that story long after the evidence says it's wrong. The question that lingered after his sentencing wasn't just, how many did he really kill? It was, how many men like him are still out there, living on cul-de-sacs, coaching games, grilling on weekends, carrying a second phone no one sees. In the end, what broke his double life wasn't a profiler or a lucky traffic stop. It was a flooded washing machine, a box that fell over, a wife who finally let herself believe what she didn't want to see. If there's anything to take from the suburban dad living a double life as a killer, it's this: evil doesn't always look like a stranger in an alley. Sometimes it looks like the man who offers you a ride because it's safer than waiting here. Sometimes it looks like the guy next door who never forgets to wave. And sometimes the only reason we don't see it sooner is that we're too busy reassuring ourselves that people like that could never live on our street. And as always, subscribe and follow Enter the Crime for more stories.